Hey, everybody. I hope you were having an awesome week. Just going to give you our Sunday school video for today. We are finishing up a unit this week, finishing up unit 27. So we're on session 4, and this is our doctrinal lesson for the unit. So I love these doctrinal lessons. Forgive me just a minute. I'm just lining up my screen here. So for this lesson, we're talking about Jesus is the conquering king. So we've talked about that he is an accused king, he is a crucified king, he is a risen king. So this week, we're talking about Christ is our conquering king. And we're going to cite several passages in the New Testament to describe this. And so just going to kind of go through the points. I think the commentary is really, really helpful. It's always helpful, but especially as we're studying this one. So our first passage is in Hebrews 1. Let me see that Jesus is the eternal king, ruling the universe. So Hebrews 1, this is actually a quote of Psalm 2. So you'll see that the author of Hebrews is quoting. And if you go to Psalm 2, you'll see what he's talking about right there. And I love it because it says, we'll look at verse 8 of Hebrews 1. It says, "But to the Son, your throne, God, is forever and ever. And the scepter of your kingdom is a scepter of justice. You have loved righteousness, hated lawlessness. This is why your God has anointed you with the oil of joy rather than your companions." We can all, well, not today. We don't have this kind of governing style, but the people in Jesus's day understood what a good king was and what a bad king was. And most often that had to do with their morals, their justice, what they stood for. And so in the Bible, we have a lot of examples of good kings. We have many more examples of some really bad kings. And so when Jesus is the king of the universe, number one, when he says he's the conqueror, like the conquering king, that's inferring to the fact that he has conquered sin and death. What no king could ever conquer before, greater than any military victory or any political gain, he has conquered sin and death. And so that makes him the ultimate king of the universe. Because he's the creator of the universe. And so, but in this passage, we get this really cool view of a scepter of his kingdom as a scepter of justice, right? Like we can say whatever we want about people in this world, but they can never live up to how God is as our king, how Christ is as our king. And so, so that's your first point there. Definitely want to look at Psalm 2 for more information on that. And then we go to the book of Colossians. The book of Colossians, chapter 1, chapter 1, verses 18 through 20. And this is where we see that Jesus is the resurrected king, directing the church. I'll just read verse 18. He is also the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn of the dead, so that he might come to have first place in everything. When I read this verse, it takes me back to Peter's confession. If you remember, there's a time that Jesus sits down with his disciples, and his disciples are saying, some say you're Elijah, some say you're Moses, or they're saying all these different names of like who Jesus could be. And so Jesus just asks him, he says, "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter in that moment confesses Jesus as the Messiah. And then remember what Jesus says. He says, "Peter, on this rock, I will build my church." Now, that verse also often can be misunderstood and mistranslated. Some people would say that means that there's something significant about Peter. It says like that on Peter, like that this church will be built. Peter became the first pope. However, it didn't. That's not, I don't think, what Jesus was getting at. It was more on Peter, on this confession of who I am, I will build my church. And so you see it right there, that he is the firstborn from the dead, so that he might come to have first place in everything. The whole reason we have resurrection life, the whole reason that when our heart stops beating on this earth, that our eternity does not end. It moves on to the next phase, the best phase of being in heaven. The reason that is possible is because Jesus rose from the grave. And so because he is the firstborn from the dead, he is given everything, right? He deserves the honor and all the glory. And us understanding that, it's that understanding, that confession that the gospel of Jesus Christ is built off of. right? That the church of Christ is built off of, is what the gospel truly is. So I'm trying to remember that passage. I think it might be Matthew 16, but I don't, it may be, that may not be right at all. So, but that could be even a good passage to bring up as you're talking about, Jesus is the resurrected King. And then finally, Revelation 22, starting in verse 12. It's the last chapter of the Bible, one of the best chapters of the Bible. This is Jesus speaking. He says, "Look, I am coming quickly, and my reward is with me to repay each person according to what he has done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end." The last point we have is that Jesus is the returning King, rewarding the faithful. Now, when he says this, he is speaking of the reward that we have as Christians. But I think also at the same time, we have to understand that as Jesus comes back one day, that he will give the rewards of his people, which means, yes, for us, we get eternal life with him. Maybe he gives us these gifts. However, that also means that, like, because Jesus is coming back, that means that the clock is ticking, that God's mercy and his grace to those who don't believe in him will not last forever. And so, so that's a hopeful moment for us as Christians, but also that's a condemning moment for those that don't have Jesus, because at that point it's too late. And so, so what an incentive it is for us to understand that Jesus is our conquering King, that he defeated death and grave. He is the he's the Alpha and the Omega. He is the firstborn from the dead, so that in everything he might have preeminence. I hope that helps you as you study this week and as you teach our students. So thank you guys for what you do. Y'all are awesome. So have a great week, and we'll see you Sunday.